Hey. What's up, Stallions? Welcome to 60 Days, 60K. This is week 5. If you haven't watched weeks 1 through 4, you should stop this video, go back to our menu, and watch weeks 1 through 4 so you can get caught up on what's been going on in this challenge. We also want to give a big shout out to the Houston Astros, the World Series champions, and to Mattress Mack, who sponsored us this summer and also won $75 million on the Houston Astros. What an awesome time to be a Houstonian. What an awesome time to be playing PLO in Houston. Y'all should come out here, check it out. Let's go, Stallions. What's up, Stallions? Day 29, better known as week 5, day 1. Ended the week on an upswing, even though we had a huge downswing in the middle of the week. Had a 17K downswing, ended the week on a 7K upswing, so got a little bit of it back, but still ended negative for the week. Puts us in a little hole to start this week. We're about 12,000 behind pace right now. That's only like 2 sessions. You never know on some of these games it can happen. But my biggest goal this week is to eliminate the downswings like last week. So I know what happened. Every one of those games that I lost pretty big in last week, I had gotten back to close to even or was up at some point. Lost a few hands when I was kind of tired, or I probably should have already left. I did the same thing last night. I know I was up 3,500 and I ended up giving back 2,000 before I left. So never a good feeling. I'm gonna work this week on locking up some wins, not giving anything back, and making sure that if I am stuck and I'm making a comeback, I gotta be okay with losing just 1,000 or 1,500 and not trying to chase that last 1,000. When I'm in 7,000, then it just takes one big hand for me to lose the whole session. So that's the plan, that's the goal for this week, is to make sure we stay away from those like we did in week 1 through 3. Week 5, you know, let's make it a 15K to 20K week, get back on track. It's another rainy day here in Houston, I should say. Love the rain. Gonna start day 1 of week 5 with a good win. Gonna sit inside, stay out of this rain, make some money, get us back on track. Time to catch up. We got a lot of catching up to do, so go Stallions.
Week 5, we decided to start off right where we left off week 4, one-on-one Richmond.
We're gonna talk about game selection real quick. So when I got here, there was 3 games, PLO games going. 2 1-3s and a 1-3-6. Started out on a bad 1-3 game. I was definitely the most action. Probably had more money than most of the players on the table. Didn't want to play that because I don't want to win a bunch of people with less money than me. I want to win a bunch of people with more money than me. So moved to the second 1-3 table. There was a little more money there, but not a great game. A lot of action, but the 1-3-6 game has a lot of action. So now I got moved to that, and I am the tightest player on the table. So I usually don't like being the tightest. I like being second, third most aggressive and having 1 or 2 guys more aggressive than me. I feel like the dynamic for my style of play is better in that situation. The dynamic isn't very good for me at this bottom, but I'm behind right now, so I need to make some money. So I'm playing 8-handed. 7 guys have more money than me, and so I can double up through any of them, or this is a chance to win, you know, 10K sessions, 15K sessions. Other tables, the most I could have won was maybe 1,000, maybe 800. So got off that table. Now we're gonna take our chance.
I would jump directly into a 1-3 PLO game and the action would get started instantly. First hand I looked down at, I flop a full house with King, Jack, Jack 10. The turn and the river would come out 2 of clubs followed by the 9 of hearts. I never saw my opponent's hand, but 85% of the time he has 10 outs. About 12% of the time he has 6 outs. The 6-outer would be a hand like ace, king, king, queen, and then also about 3% of the time, he flopped me dead with a hand like ace, jack, or ace, ace. With me being a favorite to win 97% of the time, I decided to get all in on the flop for the player's remaining short stack of $400 and send him to the showers. A hand like this could play a variety of ways, so that is where the non-controlled variable aspect of poker comes into play. The non-controlled variable in this instant is the stack size of my opponent. Who or what type of player my opponent is, and what is the position of the opponent in relation to me and the button. With his chip stack, the hand plays pretty straightforward, and I put him at risk for his whole stack on the flop. This hand would play out completely different depending on those variables. If he had a larger stack size, or if he was out of position, I would have to adapt and play this hand differently to account for the variables. I might have to bet smaller on the flop and look for a safe turn card, and when the safe turn card comes, I'll get the rest of the chips in right then and there. Every situation is different in poker, so that's why I don't like to waste a lot of time on the hypothetical, how would you play this hand? I can play a hand 100 different ways, and that decision on how I play the hand is directly affected by the variables presented in the hand. Enough with the nerdy math talk, and let's get back to poker. I would end up playing this 1-3 PLO session for about 2 hours, and despite the hot start, I would end up losing $170. This session would have been a lot easier to book a win if the dealer in the box right now would have been on the table playing rather than dealing. But nonetheless, we can't pick our opponents at the poker table, so I decided to quit the game loser in order to play a bigger 1-3-6 game that I just got called for a seat in. I would sit down just after 5 o'clock, and I continued to make the same mistake that was my downfall in week 4. I peaked at $2,500 winner in this session, and I would end up only leaving with $780 profit. Knowing when to leave a game and to protect your win is a valuable lesson with no science or reasoning behind it. A very similar comparison would be when to sell a stock or a crypto asset. It is almost impossible to sell at the perfect time every time, but nonetheless, timing is everything. This is true in life, in poker, in investments, and in relationships. With a $170 loss in the smaller game, this means I played for about 9 hours on day 29 and would have a total profit of only $610. Not the most exciting day, but at least I got to eat good food and stay out of the rain. This small profit for the day would do very little in making up any of the difference in the pace for the 60K 60 days, but at least I got the line to continue in an upward direction. We're going to take that momentum on to day 30. After taking a few big hits last week, I decided I was going to change it up a bit this week. Cash games are mainly about being patient and targeting certain players at the table or even around the city. Houston is an hour away from Houston, so that means there are places to play all over town. I catch wind that a few local legends have been checking out a really nice spot on the west side that just got taken over by new ownership and management. In private or semi-private games like at this spot or the garage, you're able to know a lot of the players you were playing with before even showing up. That makes the non-controlled variable into a semi-controlled variable. In the public spots, you can't really control who you're playing with or who's going to be there when you show up, but you're allowed to change tables or get a seat change. With that being said, day 30 finds me at Ace City off 99 and I-10 to play with a few of the Katy legends. Ace City starts every dealer down with a double board bomb pot. These can be the scariest hands of the day, but they can also be the most profitable, so proceed with caution. A good friend of mine from the Mattress Mack stable, Fireman Scott,
Hello.
has been hired by this club to get the buzz going around town about Ace City 99. So I was excited to start putting in more hours there, and to play with a group of guys I have very limited hours against. The main guy that this game is built around, let's refer to him as Mr. Nice Guy. I have very limited table time with Mr. Nice Guy, but it is obvious that he just plays poker to enjoy the social aspect and satisfy that gambling itch at the same time. The amount of money we are playing for means virtually nothing to him.
Too bad he's in for like 7,000. Tico's.
And these are the type players you dream to play against. The most important advice I can give as a poker player about playing with this type of player is always make sure you treat them with the utmost respect and make sure they enjoy playing with you. They will never mind losing to you as long as you always have a good attitude, whether you're winning or you're losing. There's nothing worse than getting medallaed out here in Houston and not being able to find a place or a game that people want you at. Now, let's get back to Mr. Nice Guy. The most dangerous thing about playing with this type of player is that your stack in front of you is always at risk. Every hand, no matter how big your stack is.
I like the 5. Ding, 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 ding. Oh, boo, boo. Have a wheel. No good.
A wheel?
I'm at straight.
Fireman Scott would experience this firsthand over and over this day. It was another rainy day in Houston, but it was raining Fireman Scott chips inside of Ace City. Fortunately for me, I would navigate my way through a 6-hour and 15-minute session and find myself winner to the tune of $3,170. I would be in for my initial 1K buy-in and would never have to add on or rebuy. This session would help me get back closer to being on pace, but I still have a lot of making up to do, and it's only 8 p.m. So the next question is, do I go play somewhere else and try to chip away at the pace for the 60K 60 days? Or do I go home and call it a night? On day 31, I would go play where all the monkeys were at. The kitchen had a great menu for the day, so I started with the shrimp po' boy right as I got the session started. This was the first hand I chose to play for the day, and I would get it in Houston heads up. Me raising, 5 other players calling around the table. As you can hear from the audio, I would run into all the action players on a 7-7-4-7-9 board and would get beat by quads.
Once,
I got
twice.
quads right now, so
You got quads?
yeah.
Just go.
No, just run it.
I'm picking up right where I left off last time I was here. Well, that hand is over and it's time to shake it off and reload for another 2,000. This would put me in for a total of 3K now on the session. I would run this buy-in back to even at 3K, then lose my mind and my money in the exact spot I knew I had to be careful in. If you can remember in week 4, I talked about this exact spot, about having these 2 action players to my right and having a few sharks to my left. Well, this hand right here is exactly what I was talking about, and it came to life in front of my very eyes less than a week later.
$11,200 side pot.
$675. I need some more chips, Wood.
Good Lord have mercy.
And then we got another pot over there, right?
I would go broke in this almost 15K pot, which forced me to rebuy for another 3K, which now puts me into this game for a total of $6,000. I knew I was gambling when I decided to put the $3,300 in, but this hand is the perfect example of how calling one person's bet turns into a dangerous series of events that gets you roped into gambling pre-flop and putting in way more money than you ever should have to. This hand all started with calling a $200 raise, followed by a $600 raise, followed by, hell, let's just put $3,300 in pre-flop and see who gets lucky. It's not how PLO should be played, but every once in a while, you have to gamble with the donkeys to get respect. I would end up getting a chance to get almost even on my last buy-in, but then I ran into another north side gem that ended up moving to our table from the must move. We will call this player Mr. Electric. The best thing about playing at the garage is that most everyone here owns their own business or has a good paying job. And when you play with people who work hard for their money, they can gamble however they choose. And for this reason, I can't get mad when Mr. Electric decides to raise me on a board of 3 of clubs, 4 of spades, 4 of clubs. Now he had been the initial raiser in this hand, and I just flatted his raise pre-flop. So I'm putting him on an overpair with possibly a club draw as well. There's no way I am ever folding my hand to him right here. So I'm hoping that he has somewhere around a 9-out hand with the club draw and an overpair, and I was wrong. He actually didn't even have a club draw. He just had a straight up overpair and a gut shot, leaving him 6 outs to win this hand. Since the poker gods already decided that I was going to be a loser in this session, you can already guess it. He turned the gut shot straight right off with the 5 of hearts. This turn card would turn me from a huge favorite into a huge underdog. Now I was left with 6 outs with 1 card to go, and the 7 in the river would not be one of my 6 outs. Well, my decision was made really easy. Mr. Electric decides he's going to cash out of the game, so I decide it's time for me to call it a night. I would cash out the last 1,000 in front of me, bringing me to a loss of $5,000 after a 6.5-hour session. This loss completely negates the 2 successful days I had to start the week, and now I'm back to negative for the week and deeper below the paceline for the challenge. Have I become the honey at the garage to the plumbers and electricians on the north side? This loss here has me questioning life decisions, and if the garage game is really as easy as I once thought it was. I decided I needed to take a good piece of advice I got from a mentor of mine. After losing millions of dollars on the Super Bowl, Mattress Mack told me that gamblers need to have a short memory. It's time to forget about the past losses and move forward to the next opportunity. Maybe we can end up getting all this money back by betting on the Astros to win the World Series. Day 32 would be back to Ace City to play an afternoon session with Mr. Nice Guy and company. I would be active early, and I get caught up in a hand against a tighter player I'm normally not looking to play many hands against. But we both get all in on the flop for about 1,000 apiece. I would find top 2 pair with my King 8, but as my opponent informs me, he has a ton of outs.
Overpairing the nut flush, sir.
Jesus. You are a favorite. We're coin tossing, essentially. King 8, 6, 2 hearts. Deuce. King 8. Oh, no deuce. Fuck.
We're basically a coin toss with the hand that he has and the hand that I have. And I don't like to split pots, so I decided to flip the coin one time, and I would hold. Looks like today is gonna go a lot better than yesterday. On my first $1,000 all-in yesterday, I was felted instantly. But today, I found the double. So let's go, let's ride the momentum and try to play a hand with Mr. Nice Guy. Double suited hands without nut flush draws are a lot stronger when being played heads up. This means if I'm gonna rely on winning a hand with something like an 8-high flush, I better not be in a multi-way pot going to a showdown. This is one of the biggest differences between a weak and strong PLO player. Now, finding the ways to isolate your hand to where it can be successful is what makes a player profitable in PLO. I would find myself in a big hand against the player I drove all the way out here to play against, Mr. Nice Guy. Now, the hand I decided to play here isn't a very good multi-way hand, but it is a pretty strong hand heads up. Now, the only thing I have to do now is figure out how to get this hand heads up with just Mr. Nice Guy. Now, we are playing a 1-3 game with a $6 straddle, which means the open is $30. If I decide to open the 30 here, he probably will just flat call, and so will a few other people around the table. Well, I don't want that. I'm trying to get this hand heads up, so my possibility of my 8-high flush is a lot better. Now, Mr. Nice Guy is almost guaranteed to open for 30 if no one else has in front of him. He's the $6 button straddle, and so he decides to open for 30, and there's a few callers after him. Now the pot's big enough to where I have a chance to isolate it. I decide to go ahead and raise this to the pot, which is $185. My $185 would accomplish exactly what I was trying to do. Me and Mr. Nice Guy, heads up, mano-y-mano. We would go heads up to the flop, in which we both flop 2 pair. He flopped top 2, and I flopped top and bottom. Now this is a huge flop for me heads up. It would be a scary flop if it was multi-way, but heads up against one other player, 2 pair is a strong hand on this uncoordinated board. Now I already felt pretty confident with my top and bottom pair here. Now I feel extra lucky because I look out there and I see the deuce of diamond. And if y'all remember from last week, the deuce of diamond been lucky for me this year. So I know when I see the deuce of diamond, it's time for me to double up. I also had backdoor diamonds in my hand. So if all else fails, I can hit runner diamonds to make the nuts. We would end up getting all in on the flop for a little over $1,700, and I would get the miracle turn card of a deuce. That miracle 2 would turn me from a 0 into a hero. Now, when you're playing in a game like this, where everyone at the table is trying to get doubled up through one particular player, you have to take shots at this player when you are able to isolate him in a hand. If you come up short and end up losing your stack to him, it's not the end of the world. The chips will still be in play the very next hand and every hand from there on after. As long as you have enough chips to keep rebuying, you will always have a chance to get your chips back. There's so many factors that come into play with how you play a hand, when you decide to play a hand, and who you're playing the hand against. I normally wouldn't even play the ace-10, 8-2, but I knew that I had an opportunity to isolate that player right here on this hand, and I was literally looking for a double up. Now I know I got lucky. I'm not going to sit here and try to defend my play and say I'm a great PLO player in this particular hand, but I did accomplish what I was trying to do. I was trying to play a hand heads up with Mr. Nice Guy, and I was trying to get a double up. I was very fortunate to hit an 8-outer from the flop and actually turn him to only 3 outs. This would put my stack at just under 4K for the day, and I would end up playing a 7-hour session, lose a little of it back, but not all of it. I would cash out for $29.80, which gave me a profit of $1,980 on the session. This would get me back into the positive for the week, but I was still nowhere near my weekly goal of 7K. Since I was already in Katy, I decided to go down the street to 101 Katy and play a night session. Although there are donkeys everywhere in Katy, this would be a boring 4-hour session where the most excitement was the food. I would be stuck most all of this session, and then I finally got out of the trap at 1:15 in the morning and became a $100 winner. And that's when I decided it was time to call it a night. $100 in a 4-hour session just isn't going to cut it. As you can see, the pace line keeps going up, but my result line is having a hard time keeping up with the pace. This 60 days, 60K isn't going to be easy. The grind is starting to get to me, and I'm really missing playing No Limit Hold'em and tournament poker. I've always believed that tournaments are for dreamers, but I will always be a dreamer. I was starting to get burned out on the cash game grind, and I haven't played a tournament in over a month. I decided it was time for me to take a weekend off from the challenge and take a weekend getaway with the love of my life. Unfortunately for her, the weekend getaway with a poker player consists of a $250K guaranteed tournament in San Antonio, Texas. When I play cash, I play Pot Limit Omaha, but when I play tournaments, I mainly play No Limit Hold'em. We would get an Airbnb for the weekend with a plan to make a deep run after I backed a big stack on day one. First place in this tournament could pay a potential of $60K for first place. Now I'm doing a challenge where I'm trying to make $60K in 60 days. But in tournaments, like I said, they're for dreamers. You can make $60K in one weekend. Now this money won't count towards the $60K 60-day challenge, but every poker player dreams of trophies and grand prizes, so that's what we're here this weekend chasing. After a long weekend of chasing dreams, we would end up short in 17th place. We would still make out with the decent cash, but we had time to reflect on everything in the loser's lounge. I have always primarily been a cash player that will take random shots at tournaments. The reason I chose to play cash over tournaments primarily is because of controlled variables. The more you can learn to control variables in cash games, the less you have to rely on luck, and the more you can rely on strategy. A controlled variable in a cash game includes the amount of chips you decide to play with. And this is a constant decision you have during a cash game. If you want to add on after a hand, you can add on at any point. Compared to a tournament where everyone starts with the same amount of chips. Also, in a cash game, you can decide how long of a session you want to play. Compared to a tournament where you have to play until you have all the chips or none of the chips. And often tournaments are multi-days. So you're committing 20-something hours if you want to be the winner. In a cash game, you can also target certain players, so you have semi-control of who you play with on an everyday basis. In a tournament, you have the luck of the draw. You're going to get a random seat, and you never know who's going to be at your table. So for all you stallions out there, whether you're trying to make extra money playing poker, or if you're a young stallion out there that wants to stop dealing because you think that you can make enough playing, remember that the more variables that you have control of, the less luck that is involved to become profitable. There's a reason that cash is king and tournaments are for dreamers. This week ends the first month, so here's a rundown of the stats about halfway through. I have played a total of 203 hours, in which I am averaging $85 an hour. Those 203 hours have been spread out between 101 Richmond, the Garage, Ace City, and 101 Katy. My initial goal for this challenge was to play around 340 total hours and average around $175 an hour. I'm currently behind by $14,731, so the only way to catch up is for me to play more hours or to play better quality hours. I'm hoping that by adding Ace City and 101 Katy to my weekly routine, I can improve that hourly to $175, so I can still dedicate the time to the more important things in my life. Please follow along and subscribe to the Poker Stallions to see if adding the Katy games will do anything to help me get closer on the 60-day, 60K challenge.